Happy Sunday, everybody, and welcome back to The Science Behind with me, your host, Harper Kravitz. This week's episode is the science behind the hidden costs of green tech. For the last decade, the narrative around green tech has been framed as a hero story. It's the solar panels saving the family farm, the silent electric car speeding away from a smoggy past, the wind turbine turning on the lights in a remote village, and look, that narrative is mostly true. These technologies are the most powerful tools we have to fight a changing climate. But in science, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Every time we solve an engineering problem, we usually create a logistics problem, a chemistry problem, or a waste problem somewhere else. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the things you don't usually see in the glossy brochures. We're talking about the lithium mines in the high deserts of South America, the solar graveyards that are starting to pop up in landfills, and the complicated math of carbon offsets that doesn't always add up. This isn't about debunking green energy. It's about maturing our conversation around it, because if we want to have a truly sustainable world, we have to understand the full life cycle of the things we build, and have to look at the hidden costs. Let's dive straight into the heart of the electric revolution. The battery, specifically the lithium-ion battery. When you drive a gas-powered car, the environmental cost is distributed. Every mile you drive, you're burning fuel and releasing CO2. With an electric vehicle, or EV, that cost is front-loaded. The emissions don't come from the tailpipe, but instead they come from the factory, and more importantly, the mine. Most of the world's lithium comes from the Lithium Triangle, a high-altitude region spanning Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia. Now, when we think of mining, we usually think of giant pits in the ground. But lithium mining often looks like giant, colorful ponds in the middle of a salt flat. Miners pump salty, mineral-rich water called brine from deep underground into these massive evaporation ponds. They let the sun do the work for about 18 months until the lithium is concentrated enough to harvest. The science problem here is water displacement. It takes roughly 500,000 gallons of water to produce 1 metric ton of lithium. In a desert, the driest place on Earth, that water is being pulled from the same underground aquifers that local indigenous communities and wildlife rely on. When the water table drops, the local ecosystems suffer. We are essentially trading atmospheric carbon for regional water scarcity. Then there's cobalt. This is the blue gold that keeps your battery stable and prevents it from catching fire. About 70% of the world's cobalt comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo. While there are large industrial mines, about 15% to 30% comes from artisanal mining. This is a sanitized term for people digging in unregulated handmade tunnels. The human cost here, safety risks, lack of oversight, and labor issues, is a dark shadow over the clean image of EVs. Now, it's vital to put this in perspective. If you look at the total life cycle, an EV usually becomes cleaner than a gas car after about 15,000 to 20,000 miles of driving. But we shouldn't be satisfied with just being better than oil. The goal of green tech should be to minimize harm everywhere, not just in our own backyards. Next, let's look at solar. Solar is perhaps the most passive green tech. You put a panel on a roof, it has no moving parts, and it generates electricity for 25 to 30 years. It feels permanent, but it's not. Right now, the world is in a massive installation phase. We're putting up millions of panels a year. But we are fast approaching the first major retirement wave of the panels installed in the early 2000s. A solar panel is an engineering marvel. It's made of silicon cells encased in a polymer, backed by a plastic shield, and framed in aluminum. Everything is glued together with high-strength industrial adhesives designed to survive hailstorms and extreme heat. Because they're built so well, they're incredibly hard to take apart. If you want to recycle a solar panel today, you usually have to shred it. But when you shred it, you mix the glass, the silicon, and the metals together, making the result mush, much less valuable. Currently, it costs about $20 to $30 to properly recycle one panel. It costs about $1 to $2 to just dump it in a landfill. If we don't change the chemistry or the laws around disposal, by the year 2050, we could be looking at 78 million metric tons of solar waste. That's not just a trash problem, it's a wasted opportunity. Those panels contain silver, copper, and high-grade silicon that we're currently throwing away while we go out and mine for new silver and copper. The science behind the fix here is called circular design. We need to stop building panels like they're permanent and start building them like they're Lego bricks, meant to be snapped together and eventually snapped apart. Now we're moving from physical hardware to something a bit more abstract. Carbon offsets. You've seen the same prompt at checkout, carbon neutral shipping, or offset your flight for $10. It sounds like a perfect moral reset button, but the science of measuring saved carbon is incredibly difficult. The most common offset is planting trees. Trees are great because they're nature's carbon capture machines, but a tree is a slow solution to a fast problem. When you burn jet fuel, that CO2 is in the atmosphere instantly. A sapling takes 20 years to reach a size where it's actually sequestering a significant amount of carbon. And then there's the issue of permanence. What happens if that forest catches fire in 10 years? All that stored carbon is released right back into the sky. The offset you paid for essentially disappears, but the flight you took is already in the books. There's also a concept called additionally. For an offset to be real, your money has to cause something to happen that wasn't already going to happen. Imagine a company pays to protect a forest that was already part of a national park. Since that forest wasn't going to be cut down anyway, no extra carbon was saved. It's just creative accounting. Recent investigations into major offset registries have found that a staggering percentage of these projects don't actually provide the climate benefits that they claim. Offset lifestyle can be a tool, but they can't be a shield. We can't buy our way out of a carbon-heavy lifestyle without actually changing the way we produce energy in the first place. One area where we're seeing the real progress in solving these hidden costs is what we call second life applications. When an EV battery drops to about 70 or 80% capacity, it's no longer great for a car. You want your car to have full range, right? But that battery still has a massive amount of storage left. Instead of shredding it or mining more lithium, engineers are now taking those used batteries and stacking them together to create massive storage banks for the power grid. These batteries can sit in a building and store solar power during the day to use at night. This doubles or triples the value of that original mining we talked about in segment 1. It turns a 10-year product into a 30-year product. This is the kind of thing we need, maximizing every ounce of material we take from the earth. So, what's the final word on the hidden costs of green tech? If there's one thing I want you to take away from this episode, it's this. Sustainability is a process, not a label. We shouldn't look at the environmental impact of a lithium mine and say, well, I guess we should just keep using oil. That's like refusing to treat a broken leg because the cast is itchy. Fossil fuels have hidden costs that are far more catastrophic: air pollution that kills millions every year, and a warming planet that threatens our very way of life. The hidden costs of green tech are different because they are solvable. We can invent better recycling methods. We can legislate ethical mining. We can develop batteries that use common table salt instead of rare cobalt. The danger isn't the technology itself. The danger is the assumption that because something is green, it's perfect. When we stop asking questions, we stop innovating. So next time you see a 100% eco-friendly sticker, don't just smile and nod. Ask about the life cycle. Ask about the waste. Ask about how we can make the better solution even better. That's all for this week's episode of The Science Behind. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive. If you have any questions about today's episode or ideas for what we should look into next, email me at thesciencebehind.media@gmail.com or comment on any of our episodes. See you next Sunday where we make science make sense.